All right, welcome back. In this explainer, we're going to put on our chemical detective hats. We're tackling one of the big ones from the AQA GCSE chemistry syllabus, how to identify unknown ionic compounds. This is AQA's required practical number 7, and trust me, it's about way more than just memorizing facts. It's about learning how to think like a real chemist. So, picture this. You walk into the lab and your teacher hands you a test tube. Inside, just a plain, boring-looking white powder. But what is it? It could be table salt, or it could be something totally different. Your job is to figure it out, to unmask its identity using just the tools of chemistry. The question is, where on earth do you start? Well, first things first, we need to know what we're actually looking for. Chances are this mystery powder is an ionic compound. And if you remember, these are just giant structures, kind of like a crystal lattice, made of positive ions and negative ions, all stuck together. So our puzzle has two pieces. We need to find the positive ion, and we need to find the negative ion. Find both, and we've solved the case.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the mystery of the ionic compound. First, we'll hunt for the positive ions, the cations. Then we'll track down the negative ions, the anions. After that, it's all about putting those clues together to crack the case. And finally, we'll talk about how to nail this in your practical exam. Let's get into it.
All right, part 1, let's go find those positive ions, the cations. This is the first half of the puzzle, finding the chemical identity of that metal ion. So, for cations, we've got two main tools in our detective kit. First up, we have the classic flame test. It's awesome. You basically just heat the metal ions, and they give off these amazing, unique colors. It's literally like a mini fireworks show. The second tool is the precipitate test. This sounds complicated, but all you do is add a chemical, sodium hydroxide, and see if a solid forms. That solid is called a precipitate, and its color gives us a massive clue. And these are the results you have got to know for your exam. Seriously, tattoo these onto your brain. Each color is a dead giveaway. Lithium, that's a bold crimson red. Sodium gives off a really bright yellow, like those old school streetlights. Potassium is this gorgeous lilac color. Calcium is kind of an orange red, and copper, that's a really cool green flame. Knowing these cold is non-negotiable. Okay, but what happens if the flame test doesn't work, or if the ion doesn't give a color? That's when we use our second tool, the sodium hydroxide test. You get some really obvious ones. Copper 2 gives you this bright blue solid. Iron 2 is green, and iron 3 is a kind of rusty brown color. But hang on, look at aluminum, calcium, and magnesium. They all form a white precipitate. So how in the world do you tell them apart? Well, here's the secret trick, and it's a huge exam tip. Only the aluminum precipitate will disappear. It'll redissolve if you add more sodium hydroxide. That's the key. Remember that one. Awesome. So we've got the positive ions sorted. Now it's time for part 2. Let's go after the negative ions, the anions. We're on the hunt for the other half of our mystery compound. First on our list is the test for carbonates. This one's pretty simple, a really clear 4-step process. Step 1, you add some dilute acid. If you see fizzing, that's a good sign. That fizzing or effervescence is a gas. To check what gas it is, you bubble it through lime water. And if that lime water turns cloudy like milky water, boom, you've just found a carbonate ion. Test complete. Okay, next up, testing for sulfates. Now listen up, because the order you do things here is super important. First, you add dilute hydrochloric acid. Why? Well, it's to get rid of any snaky carbonate ions that might be there, because they could mess up your result. So acid first. Then you add a few drops of barium chloride. If you see a thick white solid, that white precipitate form, you've got yourself a sulfate. And last but not least for our anions, we're testing for the halides, the ions from group 7, like chloride, bromide, and iodide. This test feels a bit like the sulfate test. You start by adding an acid, but be careful, this time it has to be dilute nitric acid. After the acid, you add your main chemical clue, silver nitrate solution. And just like before, you're looking for a precipitate, but this time the color of that solid is everything. So here's what you're watching for. If you get a white precipitate, that's chloride. If it's more of an off-white, a cream color, that's bromide. And if it's a definite pale yellow, you've got iodide. Now, I'll be honest, telling white and cream apart can be tricky sometimes, so you really have to be a sharp observer here. It's all about careful observation. Right then, we know the tests, we've got our chemical toolkit ready. Now for the fun bit. Let's actually solve a case. We're going to take a completely unknown compound and use our new detective skills to figure out what it is. Okay, clue number 1. We take a tiny bit of our mystery powder, pop it in the flame, and we get this. a really clear, beautiful lilac flame. So, what's your first thought? What does that mean? You got it. That lilac flame is the unmistakable fingerprint of a potassium ion, K+. Just like that, half the mystery is solved. We found our positive ion. It's potassium. Okay, on to the anion. We grab a fresh sample of the powder. First, we add acid. No fizzing. Okay, so it's not a carbonate. Next, let's check for a sulfate. We add our hydrochloric acid and then a few drops of barium chloride. And bam! We get this thick white precipitate instantly. And what does a white precipitate with barium chloride mean? That's the classic textbook positive test for a sulfate ion, SO4 2-. And there it is. We have our negative ion. The case is pretty much cracked. So let's put it all together. Our positive ion was potassium. Our negative ion was sulfate. So our mystery compound is potassium sulfate. Chemical formula, K2SO4. See? By just following the clues and the procedures logically, we figured it out. Job done. But hold on, this is way more than just a fun lab experiment. This stuff is crucial for your exam. So for this last part, let's break down exactly why this practical is so important and what skills you're actually showing the examiners when you do it. You know, the exam board AQA puts it perfectly in their own specification. They say there's just no better way to learn science than by actually doing it. These practicals aren't just an afterthought. They're at the very heart of the course, designed to give you a proper, hands-on feel for chemistry that you just can't get from a book. And when you're in an exam situation, they're assessing a whole bunch of skills. They call it working scientifically. So you're showing that you can plan an experiment, that you can carry it out safely, that you can actually see what's happening and record it properly. And most importantly, you're showing that you can take those observations and figure out what they mean, to draw a proper conclusion. It's a huge part of your final grade. So we'll leave you with this one last challenge. You now know the how, as in how to do all these tests. And you know the what all the different results mean. But to really smash this and get the top grades, you need to know the why. Why, for example, do we use nitric acid for the halide test, but hydrochloric acid for the sulfate test? Pondering those why questions, that's what takes you from just knowing the facts to truly understanding the chemistry.